Hello, thank you for joining us for our next edition of the Power Learning and Leadership Series. I'm Leslie Hall, I'm the director of the Human Rights Campaign HBCU program, and I am thrilled to be with you all today for our From Campus to Career Workplace Readiness for LGBTQ Students panel. Completing the undergraduate journey and entering the workforce can be uncertain for many college graduates, especially those at the intersection of being Black and LGBTQ. As college graduates enter the employment places, they often have questions about navigating this transition and adjusting to the workplace culture. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by three wonderful working professionals in the community as they share their thoughts and best practices related to workplace readiness. I have with us today Mr. Andre Green, who is with Centene. I have Mr. Jonathan Bellamy, who is with Home Depot, and I have Mr. Dimitri Benson, who is with USAA Bank. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. As I said when we were backstage, this is, I think, an unprecedented type of panel because it's four Black men talking about workplace readiness in a lens of diversity and inclusion. And so I really do appreciate this opportunity. So without further ado, I'm going to hop in right to the first question, and we can start with last names first. And so I think, Jonathan, that puts you up, and then we can just go around. Could you just open up with your name, your pronouns, and one fun fact or personal mantra or a guiding quote that helps you throughout your professional work?
Certainly. I'm Jonathan Bellamy, and he, him, and I am a senior recruiter with the Home Depot, have a little bit more than 20 years of experience in talent acquisition that includes management positions. One fun fact about me probably is the fact that I still remember the color sequence of my first box of Crayola crayons. That would be black, blue, green, yellow, orange, red, purple, brown. You can write it down and ask me 10 years from now, I'll still be able to recite it to you. And I thank you for allowing me to be a part of the panel.
No worries. Thank you for joining us. Go with Dimitri.
Hello, good morning. My name is Dimitri Benson. My pronouns are he and him. And I am a managing attorney, executive director at USAA. I guess one fun fact about me is that I'm an avid tennis player. So.
Nice. Thank you so much, Dimitri. And Andre?
Yes, good morning. My name is Andre Greenwood. My pronouns are he and him. A fun fact about me is I met my wife in undergrad, and I married my college sweetheart. We have two beautiful daughters, Ava and Aubrey, and my wife Naima is amazing. The mantra that I like to live by is, if serving is beneath you, then leadership is beyond you.
I like that. I like that. Thank you. See, that's a gold nugget right there. We can stop the show. No, I appreciate that. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for that. Andre, let's go back to you. Where do you work? What is your role? And could you tell us a little bit about your educational and professional background? And that'll be a question for the panel.
Absolutely. So I work at Centene Corporation. I'm the vice president of provider performance. What I do in my role is I determine how much we pay for all medical and behavioral health services. So whether you go to a PCP, whether you go to a neurosurgeon, or whether you go to a counseling session, I determine the financial reimbursement for over 1.4 million members in Georgia, and also over 50,000 providers that are inside of our network. I attended the Florida A&M University. So I'm a proud Rattler, graduating in the beautiful city of Tallahassee, Florida. And so I was able to get into that role through the business program. I graduated with a finance degree from the School of Business and Engineering in industry at Florida A&M. And so with countless amounts of internships with different organizations, that helped shape me to understand what industry I wanted to go into. And again, healthcare was a very thriving industry and one that's always forever growing. And so that's how I chose the industry. And I've been with Centene a little bit over 5 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.
Sure. Thank you so much. I am with the Home Depot. I'm a senior recruiter there. I've been there just a little bit over a year. My recruitment background goes back about 20 years, maybe a little bit more than 20 years, but so I won't dwell on dating myself. I'm a graduate of Valdosta State University in South Georgia, not terribly far from Tallahassee, sir. So, not in the School of SBI. I am an arts major, communications and speech with a minor in public relations. So had to get a job where I like to talk a lot, and recruiting is definitely it. So that's what I do. And again, I'm with the Home Depot, have been there for about 1 year there.
Dimitri.
Dimitri again. I actually graduated from some schools up north, but still technically in the South. I did my undergraduate degree at Virginia Tech, or Virginia Polytechnical Institute of Technology, with a degree in economics. I decided to pursue the legal career, and I ended up going to a rival school of Virginia Tech and the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, Virginia, where I graduated with my JD, thinking that I was going to go into employment law, but ended up doing banking. Started my legal career with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which moved me out to Dallas, Texas, which I don't know if any of them are in Texas. It's definitely a different culture moving to Texas. And from the OCC, I ended up going in-house at a mid-sized bank called BBVA, which is now PNC, and then made the transition over here to USAA, where I've been here for almost 3 years as a managing attorney and executive director in our retail banking area. I do want to note that USAA is a little bit different than the other two employers in that we cater to the military. So those men and women who actually serve and their families' independence. And so it's a little bit different. I'm also a Navy brat in that my dad was in the Navy. So that was sort of my mission, was to help the military and their families' independence.
Very nice, thank you. And folks already know what I do, but I would be remiss if I didn't put out Bowie State University and Howard University in the midst, since we have the Florida A&M University here with us today. Gentlemen, Dimitri, I want this one to go to you first. In what ways has COVID-19 affected your industry or your work at large as it relates to folks, applying to USAA Bank?
Well, okay, so let's start off with how it's impacted sort of current employees and people in general.
Yeah.
So leadership at USAA Bank made the decision to allow most of the staff to work remote. Granted, we already have a culture in place at USAA where a substantial amount of the employees work remote. But when the pandemic really sort of took a foothold, I don't know the quite percentage off the top of my head, but I want to say clearly over 95%, if not more, of our staff had to make the transition from coming into an office, a physical location, to working at home to serve the members. And so currently, we just recently opened back the corporate office about a month ago. And so we are slowly making the transition back into the office for those people who have to report into an office. So current employees, we're still making that transition back into the office. In terms of how it has impacted sort of applicants, it's sort of a twofold. That's a great question, in that we have received a ton of interest, a ton of applicants. But one thing that COVID has taught sort of the industry in general is that the idea that people have to be located in a location is a bit antiquated, in that the work can get done anywhere. And so you find a lot of applicants who are looking to apply for jobs, who are wanting to stay put where they're currently located and not wanting to relocate to a location per se. And so I would say we have a huge interest, but I think it has also helped people realize that work can be done anywhere.
Thank you. Andre?
Yes, we're in a land of pivot, right, with COVID. And so obviously, similar to what you heard before, we had to really go to a work from home and a flex schedule. Believe it or not, a lot of people did not have access to internet, Wi-Fi in their home. Dealing here in Georgia, obviously I live in Atlanta, but there's many rural areas in Georgia where there's not full Wi-Fi access. And so not only from an employee staffing standpoint, but dealing with providers, they were unable to have Wi-Fi due to the fact that it was so dangerous to go into healthcare offices. We had to really pivot and do a lot more teledoc or telehealth, where you will receive your physical just like this over a Zoom call. With provider offices not having access to Wi-Fi, that really limited the access to care for a lot of our members and the patients that they cared for. So that was a huge change for us. It was a sort of risk. And also from a billing standpoint, being able to bill for services from a telehealth standpoint. And so again, that's something that we had to do, think quick on our feet, and again, provide services to the members. And again, where we provide health services and keeping people alive. So it was very important that those providers, along with the big health systems and hospitals, had communication with each other. Again, it was 2021, now it's 2022. All of Georgia does not have full access to Wi-Fi. And again, that's something that we're fighting every day here in the state of Georgia.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jonathan?
Well, I'll answer the question in two different ways. First of all, personally, because at the beginning of 2020, I was working for a European-based company. So we were under employment contracts from year to year. And so mine was not renewed. I didn't really worry about it. I have a lot of years in this game. And so when I got the news that my contract wouldn't be renewed, I didn't necessarily worry about it. Then all of a sudden it was March 2020 and COVID hit, and I was looking for work with a specialty of hiring when companies were not really hiring. So it elongated my search, and then ended up being a victim of COVID, before vaccine and everything like that. So that actually impacted it. And I say that to say, this is why I've been with Home Depot for 1 year. One of the things that is different about this particular position that I had not seen in all of my years of recruiting is the fact that you have to pay attention to the virtual or the remote world. Now, that's usually the second question that we deal with when we're interviewing, when we're screening, when we're reviewing resumes. That's always a question. Now, when before it was just a handful of people that would ask that question, well, is this a hybrid job? Do I get to work from home any of the time or anything like that? That's way up on the list of questions that they present to you now. And so that's one of the bigger changes that I've seen. I am 100% remote in my particular position, and the Home Depot does an excellent job of setting you up to deal with that. I was listening to Andre when he was speaking about the limited access that some people have. That's a very, very interesting line item that he mentioned, because we haven't had to deal with that simply because they tell us what's required. They tell us the type of space and storage that we would actually need to be able to work from home, and they help us to get that or make the adjustments that will be needed to actually do it. So that is some of the change that I've actually seen, is that one of the higher end questions in the interview process is, do I get to work from home? Can I work remotely? I'm in California. What's the salary going to be based on? Because my living expenses are California expenses. Now I'm working for an Atlanta-based company. What's the deal, type of thing. So I think the questions that you handle in the screening process are a lot different now because of COVID.
Yeah, that you all bring up a really good point, because, and this is, for our audience, as you're beginning to look for work, internet is essential at this point. And, I think the pandemic really uncovered a lot of hidden inequities that exist, when we didn't have to necessarily, because I don't like working remotely, actually. I'm like probably the 1% who likes to go into the office. But what it showed, even with the school systems, students had to go home, and the school systems had to find Wi-Fi, little hot spots for them or whatnot. And so for our recent graduates, it's important to know that many of these companies are allowing folks to work hybrid models. Some are remote, and again, Wi-Fi is just one of those things that as Andre shared, not always easily accessible across states. You know, I live in the Northeast, and not having Wi-Fi is like, what? What do you mean? And so that's just something to consider when you're looking at companies to work for. Also, thank you all for that. That was really really good. The next question I have for you is, and I'll give this to Jonathan. What tips, advice, or guidance would you share with folks during the application process for your company or company like yours?
Well, I think I can speak universally to this, but I will start specifically with the Home Depot, because I have to say this particular company, one thing that is very fortunate for me in my position here is the focus on internal growth or internal development. We really, really try to grow from within. There are people that sit in high positions that started out as cashier associates and really just work their way through a number of years. And so that's an awesome thing that I like about the company. But I say that to say this: always be prepared for the process. Understand what the process is and understand what your responsibility to the process is. What am I talking about? I can't tell you the number of internal applicants that apply that don't attach a resume, and they just automatically assume that because they're part of the company, I would have access to who they are, what they do, what they're responsible for, and what their background is. And that's not the case. So you always want to be prepared, and you always want to make sure that you answer any questions fully that are presented to you, whether they be in-person audio or if it comes to the form of an email. I often get people that don't respond to my salary question because they say, oh, I want to know more about the job. I've not met anybody that didn't have an idea of what it would take for them to actually survive or continue or maintain their life, the existence of their life in the manner that they're accustomed to, and have no clue of what type of salary that would take. I always, make it very informal and let them know I'm on the recruiting end, I'm on the front end. No, you don't want to bring those things up when you're having the conversation with the manager until you reach a certain stage in the process. But with the recruiter, if you're looking for $250,000 and I'm recruiting for a software engineer and I know the cap is $85,000, I don't want to waste your time. I want to show the most value for who you are as an applicant, as well as the value for my time as a recruiter. So those are some of the tips I would say. Know the process, always answer the questions fully. And if you don't have any idea, to say, well, I'm looking for what the market pays, is there a defined range for this position? Can you speak to the defined range for this? And then that puts the onus, or that puts the pressure on me to get back to you and provide that information. And you don't necessarily back yourself into a corner, which is what people are afraid of. They don't want to underprice or even overprice themselves. And so they'll avoid answering the question. That's never the correct answer. Avoiding the question is never the correct answer. But you find a way that shows that you bring immediate value to the company and you still answer the question. So that would really be what I would tell people: know the process, understand it, and go forth.
Thank you. Andre, Dimitri, you want to take that at it?
I will add a few things. Sorry, this is Dimitri. I will add a few things. I want to echo a lot of the things that Jonathan mentioned, but I also want to put the onus on the individual applicant to do the research. You need to do the research to determine if this company is going to be a good fit for you. And by that, I mean researching what the job culture is, looking at employee handbooks and employee policies to, for example, something as simple as sexual orientation. This is the reason why we're here, the intersection between sort of being Black and sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is not protected, a protected sort of thing in every state.
Yep.
So if you're going to be out at work, you need to make sure when you're researching for a company that sexual orientation is something that's protected in their employee handbook. Because here in Texas, for example, you can be fired at will for anything so long as it's not a prohibited basis. So race, gender are what are considered prohibited bases. Sexual orientation is not one of them. Luckily here at USAA, sexual orientation is something that's protected within our employee policy and our employee handbook. So I just want you to know, as an applicant, you need to do your due diligence. Figure out if this is the sort of culture you want to work in. You also need to figure out where you want your career to, how you want your career to grow. And also, you can't discount networking, because even though you may have all the abilities, and sort of your resume may speak volumes. I review hundreds of resumes a week. And so you need to be able to network, build those relationships with your classmates, build those relationships, go to those fairs, speak to the recruiters. It's very important that you network in this day and age.
You know, Andre, before you go, I want to make sure our audience heard something that Dimitri said, because it's absolutely true. And I have to make a plug for the Equality Act. There are many states in this country where you could still be denied services and fired and a whole host of other things because of your LGBTQ identity. And that is why, as an organization, the Human Rights Campaign supports and is lobbying Congress for the Equality Act. We need federal protections codified in our law that protects LGBTQ people on behalf of sexual orientation. And that is so critical to do that research. And one more plug before I let Andre go. We have a corporate equality index that we produce here at the Human Rights Campaign every year, where we rank companies based on their level of LGBTQ inclusion, and it is a point system, and you can see how they ranked in many different categories within that guide. And so that type of research is critical, and you did hear that right. You can be fired based on your LGBTQ identity. So please make sure you do that research. All right, Andre, thank you so much.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with everything the gentlemen have stated previously. What I would touch on as well is, before you apply for any position, whatever social media outlets that you operate on, please make sure that it's appropriate. If you do not want someone to view it, make sure your page is not public. And I would strongly suggest everyone get a LinkedIn page.
Yep.
Because a lot of recruiters, a lot of leaders, you'll be surprised. Some nights we surf LinkedIn looking for talent or just seeing what's out there. Because a lot of times when you can put an actual name with the face and you're kind of able to see a short bio on someone, that's very impactful. So I think that's key. And so once you do apply for a job, do not be bashful. If there are traits or characteristics that you possess, do not be afraid to put that on the application. You'll be surprised what will set you apart from another candidate. And then once you get into an interview, and Jonathan definitely hit on this, answer the interview question. And one thing I learned in business school was the STAR technique. When you want to answer a question, what's the situation? What's the task? What's the action? And then the result. And if you cannot do the STAR tactic in a question, particularly with leaders, the interview is probably not going to go well. And one more time, the situation,
thank you,
the task, the action, and result.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I would definitely echo the social media thing, because that's usually my first stop, is to look at social media accounts.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. And let me join in on that as well. And especially if you are engaged in a job search, LinkedIn is a requirement. I'll go as far and say that. I just, it is absolutely a requirement. In what we do, so often we're looking for passive candidates. So we may not have what we call any low-hanging fruit, someone that's actually applied for our job, though it's posted. And so we have to go on LinkedIn and find these certain specialties. So I would go as far as to say LinkedIn is a requirement if you're a job seeker.
Right.
Thank you. That was so good. And I think this next question that I have really it builds on the point that Dimitri made earlier related to doing your research. So I mean, all of you really kind of did that, but in particular to your LGBTQ identity. So this is a question for the panel. Feel free to jump in, whoever wants to answer this, but do you believe it's necessary to disclose your LGBTQ identity during the application or interview process? I have an anecdote to share, but I want to hear your thoughts first. Anybody who wants to.
I'll start this here. I'm going to say no. It's not necessary to disclose your sexual orientation. Naturally in conversations, it does come up sometimes, especially when I'm interviewing candidates. That's not a question that you should be asking as a leader. Is a person's sexual orientation or family status. But normally in just engaging in conversations, people talk about their significant others, their children. It's sort of a normal topic, but I don't think it's necessary to disclose your sexual orientation. No one's suggesting that you need to go back in the closet, but I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah. And I will jump in with you, Dimitri, and say, I always tell people or advise them to focus on what the job is going to require. Is that going to be a requirement of the job that someone know that? I can't think of any cases, or at least in what I do, where that will be a requirement. Again, casual conversation once you get the job and all, people will learn things about your personality and who you are. So I say that no, it's not necessary to disclose that. It may make more sense in certain positions. Like I know someone who was applying for a job with Netflix, and it was, in a diversity type position. And so maybe it makes a difference there, maybe it doesn't. I still would advise that it's not anything that I would advise anyone to disclose on the front end, because it's just not necessary.
No, and I agree as well. I don't think it's necessary. Being an ally and being in interview processes, when it does come up, I definitely love to talk about how I'm the executive sponsor for, the Centene Pride organization here in Georgia. And I think it is very important, being an ally, to make people comfortable if they want to disclose that information. I do think it's a responsibility as a leader, but even more responsibility as an ally. And sometimes that makes people feel a little bit more comfortable. Obviously, I'm stationed here in Atlanta, Georgia, so it's a very diverse market. Yes. So I will tell you, it comes up a lot more in my interview processes, but I do think it's because I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. And then again, I always love to share that I'm an ally, because I do think that allies play a very important role. And particularly seeing one of, a Black male, a younger executive, I think it's very important. And I also think that it's something that's mending the lines that people feel that is there, that I feel like it's truly not, and I'll just say this really quick, I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I grew up in a heavily, predominantly Caribbean neighborhood, right? And so I'm an ally. And so most people understand when you grow up in those environments, things, even though I'm in New York City, it's very different. And so I love to preach and let people know that I'm an ally, just to make people not feel uncomfortable in interview, because you should come to interview as you are. And so I definitely think that's very important. And as an ally, I challenge all my other ally brothers and sisters out there as well to speak up, because us speaking up is necessary, not necessarily the candidate feeling that it's necessary to speak up. But as allies, it's very important, and one that I take very seriously. So
now I will add and caveat my statement by saying that if, for example, that in doing your due diligence, you are unable to uncover certain cultural things about the company, there is nothing wrong with asking in the interview, hey, tell me more about your job culture here. Is there a way that I can get access to, for example, some public information, employee handbook, for example, because I just want to get an idea of what your culture is here at this company.
Absolutely.
That's a very good open-ended question that will, drive a very comprehensive response.
Yeah, I love that. Andre, you brought up something, and for our audience, I want them to know what this is. You said that you were the executive sponsor of Centene's Pride ERG. Can you tell us what a ERG is and how that benefits employees? Absolutely.
It's the employee resource group. And so a lot of times when you come into a new organization and you're not necessarily in a leadership role, these ERGs are the opportunity for a lot of staff members, team members, and employees to be in a leadership role inside these type of programs, organization, cohorts, what you want to call them. And most Fortune 500 companies have them. And so it's an organization that's tailored to the LGBTQ plus community. I sponsor the HIV 5K run here in Atlanta, Georgia. We have a huge pride parade here in Atlanta. I'll put us against a lot of other cities. I've gotten on the floats as well. I've gone with my children, my wife. It's a family event, and it's one of the staple events here in the state of Georgia. And so we do countless of events that promote pride, literally pride. And we invite a bunch of different leaders, different seminars and summits that we have all across the state. We have different speakers that come from different communities and just speak to the LGBTQ plus community and employees that we have here inside of our organization. So it's something that I take very seriously, something I love to do. And again, it's a part of networking as well. Because again, we're humans, right? You have people as part of organizations from different countries, different backgrounds, different cultures. We're all one people. And so always use this opportunity to grow inside an organization, but more importantly, use that as taking an opportunity to have a leadership role inside the organization that can open up countless of different opportunities for you as you grow inside your career.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want our audience to know that many companies, including HRC, have ERGs, and they are also based on affinity. So, you have the, Black indigenous people, people of color, PERG, the Pride ERG, there are all sorts of affinity types of groups within this. And I also want to point out, it was the second time somebody drove it home, the need for networking. Yep. And how to utilize that within the company and also with LinkedIn. And so if you don't have a LinkedIn page, guys, folks, you should probably get one. I was talking to a student last night, and they sent me their resume because they wanted me to review it before they sent it off to this particular employer. And they had their picture on it, and it was like really cute and all that. Let me ask y'all, and I know this is really a spinoff, but what is your opinion on that? Like, is it based on industry, or, is that kind of like the new wave, putting, pictures and graphics and all that on resumes? Any thoughts on that?
Well, okay, I'll start since I kind of smiled off that one. It's kind of amazing. I work for a technology company where the hub of our technology existed in Costa Rica. And so in Costa Rica, it was very common. It was how you did it. As a matter of fact, the picture and personal information appeared on every resume. For what we do in the US, I just say, I've not recruited in an industry where I would say it's necessary to do that. I've never recruited models or entertainers, and it might be, the thing to do there to have a headshot. But I would advise people not to do it. You want to have the attention centered around who you are as a professional. You want them to know who you are as a professional. As I always say, you want the company to know the immediate value that you're bringing to the company. It's always a risk in hiring, yes, but is this a good risk or is this a bad risk in looking at this person? So I wouldn't advise you to do anything that will serve as a distraction that would take away from who you are as a professional. I just, in this age of social media, they can find what you look like somewhere anyway, for the most part. So I don't see a place for it on the resume. I just don't, and that may be a lot more of a personal opinion versus a professional opinion. But I go for the value that you bring to the job, who you are as a professional, what your academic background is, what your professional experience is. Those are the things that matter.
I will also echo that as well, in that I don't think it's also necessary. Again, I want to echo what Jonathan says on what he just said. You don't want anything that's going to detract from the value added to the company. I think your resume should be highlighting your skills and abilities and how it interrelates to the job opening. And you don't want anything that's going to detract from that. So I definitely agree with that.
Yep, and I definitely agree with my panelists here. It's definitely not necessary, but what I will say is I'll go back to LinkedIn again. I would have a URL link under your name, email address, where I can click right on there when I'm looking at your resume, and then maybe your LinkedIn can maybe expound upon even more things that you're doing, whether it's in the community or different goals or aspirations or achievements that you have, you know, brought in within your career. And so that's what I would do. I would not put a picture up there, but again, LinkedIn, just like Jonathan said, it's basically mandatory. Let's just say that here in this conversation, if you do not have a LinkedIn page, please create one, and no picture on the resume, just put the URL link on your resume, on the top of your resume, under your name, your email address. That's the next thing on there, because most people don't put addresses anymore, right? Yeah. We talked about what has changed with COVID. Yeah. You might limit yourself if you say you're in a particular state. Just put your name, your email address, and your LinkedIn URL.
Yeah.
And to me, that will help you and your candidacy and being selected in the interview process.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jonathan brought that up the other day when we had a chat. Go ahead, Dimitri.
I was going to echo also something that Andre said, though. Please make sure you also privatize your other social media accounts like Instagram and Facebook.
Yes, please. You'll be surprised what could get pulled up on Google or when someone searches your name.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, Jonathan and I, chatted a few days ago, and he had said something to me that I was just like, wow, you're absolutely right. I haven't been in the job market in a little while. I've been at HRC 6 years, going on 7 years. So, but I update my resume quite often with things that I'm doing. I have I'm finishing up a PhD, so I have a curriculum vitae as well. So I'm putting things there, and I still have my address on there. And Jonathan was like, nobody's putting their address on there anymore. You're like, nobody needs to know where you live. Especially if you're applying for a job far away, they might look at that and say, oh, we don't have relocation costs, so we don't do this or that. And so that might serve as a distraction for you. And so I think, folks are putting, LinkedIn links or getting PO boxes or things like that. So I really appreciated that conversation. I learned a lot just in our.
Well, there are enough filters that exist already. So you shouldn't create additional filters that will limit your consideration. So definitely, it's just, we're in a totally different age and era now. My first job search was in the late 80s, so aging myself again, but the world was just totally different. Things that were necessary then aren't remotely necessary now.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. My final question, and this is like a wrap up for us. What are some top work readiness tips do you have for folks entering the workforce? I know we went through a whole lot. I hope folks really are taking notes to this, but some of the top things you want to highlight before we leave?
I'll start. Or you can start, Jonathan.
Okay. Well, what I would say is just probably just reiterate some of the things that have already been touched on, having to do with networking and research. You can't say enough about those two tools, networking and research, and just really, really pay attention to what the job is calling for. I was looking at one resume this morning where the person had applied for 27 different positions within my company. That kind of shows that you're not doing your research. It's showing that you're just applying for anything that's actually open. So you want to make sure that you're a good fit, because that's what we're looking for on this side of the fence, whether or not you're a good fit for the position. And you have to make those things. We're interviewing you and you're interviewing us at the same time. So you're trying to decide if the company is a good fit for you. And we're trying to decide if you're a good fit for the team that we're actually looking at. So do your research. Networking is key. Pay attention to what you do on social media. Those would be the big tips that I have, because I'm a little bit older than a lot of the job seekers now, but I'm just so surprised at what people think is necessary to post. And that always just surprises me. It's like, why do you think that was necessary that you post that? But it could also come back to tell a little bit more about yourself that you may not want to be considered as a part of your professional profile. So just be careful about that. And those are the things I would close out on.
Okay. I'll add to that. Some of the things that I would mention as well is remember to continue to persevere. You're definitely going to confront negativity on your journey. You may feel disrespected or not heard, but you need to keep moving forward and upward. find a community of people who will support you and lift you, and don't be afraid to walk away and find opportunities other places if it's not working for you. Also, continuously learn and be curious. Don't stop learning, be curious about new possibilities, explore them, find a path of things that you enjoy and that you find interesting. And lastly, earn the trust of leaders who can influence your career by taking ownership of problems, be solution focused, think and lead, treat others with respect, and be a good listener and be candid. Be authentically you.
Wow. A lot of jewels being dropped here. First, what I would definitely start with is find a mentor. When you're entering the workforce, find a mentor. You believe me, everyone on this panel has walked in green, a sponge, a grasshopper. Find someone. And there are people who are willing and wanting to help. And a mentor necessarily does not need to be a leader or an executive inside the organization. It could be someone else that's been somewhere for 20 years. Anyone that has extensive work experience, it's someone who is going to help you along your journey. And again, you never know along your journey when you can come back and help that same person who helped you. So again, I think a mentor is key for success. Another caveat I would like to drop is you're going to have to learn how to read. Find a book that is going to align with your career, the industry that you're in. I'm in business, right? So the book was Good to Great. That was the book I think all the B schools pushed and a lot of organizations pushed once you got there. Again, you want to read because that's going to improve your vision, your mindset, and also help you align the goals and where you want to go and where you want to see yourself in the near future and even in the far future. And then the last piece is something that everyone needs to improve on every single day, and that's communication. Mm-hmm. So many times I see emails, particularly with young graduates, you're writing an email as if you're texting. Instead of spelling out have, H-A-V-E, I see H-V. I mean, I understand that, but again, you have to be mindful of that. And even with communication, not just email, a lot of us have IMs, whether it's Skype or the different IM tools that people like to use. Be very careful. Those IMs are the same. View that as you're sending an email to your boss on your IM. Never get lax in your communication, writing anything inside of an organization, and be very careful of even what you verbalize inside your organization. I will tell you this, within the last 2 years, we have gone through a lot of systemic racism that we've seen in the country. We've seen videos of horrific killings of young Black men. There was just a massacre and a terror attack that happened in Buffalo. We all have witnessed this. We all have our views, but it's not always appropriate to give your personal views in the workplace. Be very mindful because again, we all get emotional about what's going on, right? We see the same things and we have the same battles that you all have, but we just want to be very mindful in the workplace, how we want to communicate how we feel and make sure we understand what is a safe place and what is not a safe place inside the workplace. Because again, this is the workplace. And so again, I will advise you to have maybe different groups outside of work if you feel like you need to talk to someone or if you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed of what's going on in society, because there is a lot going on outside of work. But you want to make sure that you divide work from your personal life and also the social injustices that are happening inside this country and around the world.
Thank you all so very much for that. I've learned so much. I'm sure our students and our audience have learned the same. I just want to thank Dimitri, Jonathan, and Andre so much for spending some time with me today to go over this. This is invaluable, and this is where the allyship and the support, the resources all come to head. So I really do appreciate that. I also want to give a huge thanks to USAA Bank, Home Depot, and Centene for their support of the Human Rights Campaign broadly, but certainly of the HBCU program specifically. I really, really do appreciate that. We will provide contact information for these gentlemen on the name card at the end of this webinar. So, you know, if you want to reach out to them, I also would suggest, since we've talked about it all this whole session, get a LinkedIn page, look these folks up on LinkedIn, you know, connect with them there, I think is probably even a better option anyway. And so thank you all again so much for joining us. Again, thank you to my panelists. You all were dynamic. Y'all were funny. I really enjoyed it. And incredibly knowledgeable and competent. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
Thank you. Leslie, thank you for steering the ship. You did a phenomenal job. And to my panelist brothers, you know, thank you. And I'm also going to reach out to them on LinkedIn as well.
So absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.